begin, shall we?
Good morning, Judge and jury. Today we are in court to prosecute President George W. Bush and Michael Chertoff for failing to do their jobs as President of the United States and head of Homeland Security. More importantly, they are being charged for failing to protect the American citizens who lost their lives during Hurricane Katrina. On August 29, 2005, America faced one of the biggest natural catastrophes in its history in the form of Hurricane Katrina. The evidence and witnesses we have today will show that President Bush and Michael Chertoff deserted the people of New Orleans when they needed them the most. Our witnesses against Bush and Chertoff's crimes with us today are Kathy Zeitoun, a loving wife and mother whose house and business were destroyed and husband almost killed by Hurricane Katrina; Soledad O'Brien, a CNN broadcast journalist whose first-hand interview with FEMA head Michael Brown can attest that Brown was in no way capable of holding this leadership position, yet was allowed to do so by Bush and Chertoff; and lastly, Governor Blanco and Mayor Ray Nagin, whom are being scapegoated for the government's terrible response to the disaster, when in reality they can only gain so much aid without the consent of higher authority, and were victims of the hurricane too. President Bush and Michael Chertoff ignored their responsibilities to the victims of Hurricane Katrina and the people of the United States, allowing many innocent lives to be taken. These two men had the power to save the lives of thousands of people, yet ignored to do so. Now, jury, you have the power to bring justice to those who have lost their homes, businesses, jobs, family members, and lives to Hurricane Katrina. What will you choose?
Good morning. Our clients, former President George W. Bush and the Department of Homeland Security, are not responsible for the lack of preparation, the failure to evacuate residents of New Orleans, and the preventable deaths of Hurricane Katrina. These responsibilities fall to the local and state government officials who are considered the first responders in this situation. According to the 10th Amendment, it would be against the constitutional rights of the residents of New Orleans and its governing officials if the federal government assumed responsibility of the situation without proper and orderly consent from the state of Louisiana. Due to the failure of coordination between the local officials in the state of Louisiana, New Orleans residents that were incapable of leaving their own were abandoned and left, who were incapable of leaving on their own were abandoned and left to fend for themselves. Also, due to a poorly maintained system of levees, it was merely a matter of time before the city of New Orleans found itself in the situation presented by Hurricane Katrina. The responsibility of maintaining the levees of New Orleans, which are considered property of the state, is that of the local officials who knew what the condition of the current levees were. They knew that they would barely be able to withstand a Category 3 hurricane. Also, because there were no current laws during the time of Hurricane Katrina, the President was not bound to any responsibility in forms of preparation towards a natural disaster. It would be unjust to charge this man with these false crimes. The responsibility of all forms of emergency management is directly that of local and state government. Thank you.
Can we bring Kathy Zeitoun to the stand, please? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth? Would you please state your name in relation to the trial?
My name is Kathy Zeitoun, and I'm a resident of New Orleans.
Mrs. Zeitoun, it is my understanding that you began experiencing symptoms and were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder following the Hurricane Katrina, correct?
Correct.
Can you explain your symptoms, please?
I've experienced memory loss, digestive problems, and anxiety. I've lost feeling in my hands. Sometimes I zone out when I'm doing simple tasks around the house.
Were your symptoms due to the lack of federal government aid, do you think?
Yes. I believe that if the conditions were better for the residents of New Orleans, less people would have the symptoms. My husband also suffered from the symptoms as well.
5% of those who survived 9/11 went on experiencing PTSD, but 33% suffered symptoms after Hurricane Katrina. Do you believe less people would have been affected by PTSD if the government had responded faster?
Absolutely.
I understand that your husband was in New Orleans during Katrina's wrath. Did he tell you of the government evacuations in the area?
Yes. Many times my husband has told me about the poor conditions of the evacuation of the city. Survivors were forced to relocate to bridges and overpasses as they waited for a way out. The citizens were exhausted from the heat and necessary supplies were scarce. People waited for days for any kind of governmental aid other than the bottled water being thrown from helicopters. My husband told me he would occasionally give people bottled water and canned goods to help families in need.
Did Mr. Zeitoun tell you anything about the military officials and aid given in New Orleans?
Yes, he did. He told me that military aid was called into the city to maintain order. They were called in to arrest looters. My husband asked some officials for help to rescue a couple that were trapped in their house. The officials said they would help, but did not keep their word. If not for good Samaritans like my husband, many more people would have been trapped waiting for governmental aid.
Mrs. Zeitoun, based off your experience with Hurricane Katrina and being a victim of the aftermath, do you believe the federal government mishandled the situation in New Orleans?
Absolutely. More people would have been able to evacuate before the storm hit. If the government was more prepared for disasters like this one, faster aid and supplies would have been accessible to the residents. People would have not been stranded on overpasses and rooftops waiting for any kind of assistance. The city would have been a safer place for residents, police officers, and rescuers if the national government intervened sooner. Less people would have experienced the losses and hardships the storms brought forth. I believe that less people would even have PTSD and therefore lead a better life if there was more governmental intervention.
So the prosecution has, Your Honor.
Mrs. Zeitoun, I would first like to tell the jury that a mandatory evacuation does state that you must leave under penalty of law for her husband. But I'd like to touch on a little bit of FEMA's response to the incident. And Mrs. Zeitoun, do you know what CEM system is? No. Okay. I'd like to explain the 4 points of that real quick. The first one is funds and coordinates emergency preparedness activities. Second one is provides and coordinates immediate federal response to save lives and property. The third is funds the reconstruction of damaged homes and infrastructures. And the fourth one is supports hazard mitigation activities to ensure the future disasters do not happen like this again. But the thing is, that was FEMA's responsibilities from 1979 to 2001. But after the terrorist attack in 2001, FEMA was reconstructured so that the aid wasn't entirely exactly the same. If you kind of think of FEMA before 2001 as like the base of a tree, after 2001, they were restructured and some of their responsibilities were given to other companies, maybe not even governmental companies, so that their responsibilities were kind of shifted out to like branches of a tree. So it wasn't all under the same corporation. So I would just like to state that the government's response to Hurricane Katrina in the form of FEMA was not entirely FEMA's fault because the shift of powers within FEMA from just protection of emergency situations to their new position of civil defense and post-terrorism. That's all I have.
Call Governor Blanco to the stand. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Can you state your name and occupation at the time of Hurricane Katrina to the court?
My name is Governor Kathleen Blanco, and I was governor of Louisiana.
What were your thoughts about the devastation in New Orleans?
It's it's frightening when you first start in because you see all these houses that are just destroyed and there's nothing left to them. And you just start to think of what used to be there, what the children used to do, what the parents used to do, and now they're gone and they're coming back to nothing.
You have been talked about, even laughed at for showing emotion. How do you feel about that?
Everyone wants their politicians to be human, and they want them to feel emotion and to be aware of what's going on. So it seems like the picture of me breaking down gets put everywhere, and articles that aren't even related. But when I see the picture of me, it reminds myself of all the lost lives, all the people climbing through the roofs of their house to try to escape the rising water, and the vast total destruction.
People wonder, who is to blame for the response to Katrina? Who is to blame?
I feel no state is to blame because no one has ever suffered, or no state has ever suffered this devastation. Storm killed thousands, and hundreds of thousands were left with no homes. I feel that there's no one to blame, and the destruction was brought upon New Orleans by the levees that weren't up to standard, and the evacuation plan was not successful.
Exactly when did you call for a state of emergency?
I called for a state of emergency on August 26th, and I followed up with a letter to President Bush on August 27th.
What were your other steps you did in this catastrophe?
I oversaw the massive evacuation of about 93% of New Orleans, and oversaw the rescue efforts, and we rescued over 60,000 people that were removed from New Orleans.
What about the levees? Will they be rebuilt and built to withstand a level 5 hurricane?
Yes, they will be rebuilt, but not to withstand a level 5 hurricane yet, because the engineers aren't suited to build that massive of a levee, and we don't have the money.
And how can you request local residents and businesses to come back when you can't ensure that they are not in harm's way? And then, is this building getting ahead of the rebuilding of levees there?
There's no guarantee of safety, but the engineers are rebuilding the levees to withstand a level 3 hurricane again, but to better than it was.
You are an optimist, I understand, by nature, but at the end of the day, when you're in your private space and you take off your official hat and you're in your own home, what haunts you at night? What keeps you up?
The thoughts of the people walking through the water, wading through the water, keeps me up, but I just turn all my thoughts and stuff over to the Lord and ask Him to help me figure out the next step of what to take.
Jury, I show you a dedicated governor who did the best that she could in her dire situation, and
Governor Blanco, I've just heard from the prosecution that you did the best that you could to make sure that your state would be safe. But can I read something to you from the Stanford Act? It says that a governor's request is based on a finding that the disaster is of such severity and magnitude that effective response is beyond the capabilities of the state and affected local governments, and that the federal assistance is necessary. Which you signed the paper August 26th saying that this was an emergency, but on August 27th I have a quote from you saying, "I believe we are prepared." That's the one thing I've always been able to brag about. If this is true, I have information that experts told you that it would take 48 hours to evacuate everyone from New Orleans. But it wasn't until 20 hours before the hurricane actually made landfall that you declared it a mandatory evacuation. Also, with your responsibilities as governor, you have control of the National Guard. And if you were truly worried about your state, you could have had the National Guard in there
Objection,
at any time.
Your Honor.
I feel that the attorney is lecturing our witness rather than asking questions.
Yes, let's get to a point, counsel.
Well, that's pretty much all I have. State out there's a couple facts about the Governor Blanca right here. So that's for us.
Can we please bring Governor Nagin, or Mayor Nagin, to the stand, please?
Objection. I have an objection. I thought Soledad O'Brien was next on the list.
Yes.
Is this not true prosecution?
Yes, it's true. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Okay. Please state your name and occupation.
My name is Soledad O'Brien. I'm a broadcast journalist for the CNN.
Have you reported or witnessed anything about Hurricane Katrina?
Yes, I did. During Hurricane Katrina, I covered the aftermath in New Orleans, where I also interviewed the head of FEMA, Michael Brown.
Can you describe the conditions you reported on New Orleans?
Sure. The entire city of New Orleans was completely black due to absolutely no power. There was not a single light in the city for weeks after the hurricane. Entire neighborhoods were flooded. Survivors were stranded on top of houses citywide. Clean water was unavailable, which contributed to deaths that could have been prevented. There was failure of communication where telephones, including cell phones and internet accesses, were not working. Even people with generators could not receive any communication because all the lines were broken. The Superdome itself suffered significant damage to the roof, where victims were now depending upon for shelter, food, and health care. The major thing that contributed to flooding was the city's inadequate levee system, built by the U.S. Army, left 80% of the city flooded. The first televised pictures of New Orleans were aired on national television days after the storm occurred. Almost 1,500 people died due to the Hurricane Katrina, where the government should have helped sooner to prevent deaths.
Would you agree or disagree that the government could have played a key role in saving lives but failed to do so?
Yes, I would have to agree that the government had responsibility to help those who can't evacuate themselves due to a variety of reasons, for example, of a family who can't afford to leave financially. Also, FEMA should have coordinated better effort relief such as food, water, shelter, and to rescue people from rooftops of buildings quicker than what was executed. It took FEMA 4 days going on 5 before any action was taken to help the victims. 4 days in Indonesia with the tsunami. They got food dropped off 2 days after a stroke. So many lives could be saved in that time frame to just providing the basic necessities of food and water to help save lives.
Mr. Brown, you mentioned that you spoke with Michael Brown in an interview. Can you please describe his intentions?
Sure. When I was speaking with Michael Brown, he felt sorry for the city and overall outcome of the victims suffering, but he could have done a better job sending relief efforts earlier. I asked Brown if he looked at the pictures coming out of New Orleans, and do you say you're proud of the job that FEMA is doing on the ground there in a tough situation? He did not comment besides saying Soledad. I later asked, or do you look at these pictures and say, this is a mess and we dropped the ball. We didn't do what we should have done. Brown's response continues to say, I look at these pictures and my heart breaks, and emphasizing how he assigned Army and Coast Guard and others to get supplies because he did not want any Americans to suffer due to the consequences of the disaster. But if you notice, Mr. Brown does not make one single comment about how he is proud of FEMA for their rescue efforts.
Do you believe Michael Brown was fit to be head of FEMA?
No.
All right, so, in your opinion, who would you consider the first responders in a disaster?
The state.
The state? And do you feel that the state did a good job at upholding that responsibility? Can you explain on that, please? What was it that the state did that was good during Hurricane Katrina for the residents of New Orleans?
she is no expert on the law. So
She should know the news. She reports it. I object on that objection.
The witness will be allowed to answer. However, the witness might consider whether or not Mr. Goad has any insight as to what she is feeling based on information written in an article.
Were you aware that the city of New Orleans has over 1 million residents, and that 20% of the residents were trapped there?
Say yes or no.
I don't feel like that's a very good job on the state's responsibility. I also know that when Hurricane Katrina did hit, that over 98% of the electrical grid was wiped out, and that this nearly eliminated all forms of communication. This includes cell phones, landlines, internet, and those cell towers that were still functioning during the time were easily overconsumed by distressful calls from people who were trapped and left to fend for themselves by the state.
Is there a question, Mr. Goad?
On the day of Hurricane Katrina?
I was in my residence and then relocated to the office, for building, and started coordinating from there.
And what actions did you take to help the situation?
I rallied the police and the fire department and any volunteers that I could get, and started planning out the evacuation, try to get everything out.
So based off of what you are allowed to do at this point, did you feel that your actions were appropriate?
Yes.
Is there anything that you would change about how you conducted yourself during the Katrina?
With what power I did have as mayor, I feel I executed all of my abilities. I did my best and tried my hardest with what I was given. Anything beyond that is government.
So do you feel that the government could have responded and acted more efficiently in giving aid?
Most definitely.
How so?
Quoting myself, 500 buses would have been very, very nice. But with government help, those 20% of people could have gotten help.
So the requests that you made did not get answered, correct?
No, they were not.
Okay. So did you then feel like you were a victim yourself during Katrina?
Absolutely. My house was lost just like all of the other residents, but everybody was affected differently, I guess.
Who ultimately had the control to make the changes of the outcome of Katrina?
Definitely government officials, not to point any names.
Thank you.
Now, at the end there, you just said that government officials have the responsibility to control the outcome of Hurricane Katrina?
No. I said that government officials have the authority to make a difference.
Are you not a government authority?
I'm a mayor. I am not federal.
Does government strictly refer to federal law?
No, but with the power given to me, it's not federal.
So you're saying you had no ability to make a difference during the time of Hurricane Katrina?
I made what difference I could with what power I had.
Okay. All right. I'd like to just read a little bit from an article that I found. It was written by Alex Rich and Miranda English, and it states that more than a year before Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in August 2005, the Federal Emergency Management Agency estimated that 1/3 to 1/2 of the population of New Orleans would not be able to evacuate the city in time if a Category 3 hurricane hits the city. Were you aware of this?
Oh, no.
It was over a year before Hurricane Katrina hit. How could something as substantial as this piece of information not come across the mayor's attention?
Was it made public?
Yes, it was a public article written by these two journalists.
Was it given specifically to the borough office?
It is a public piece of information presented.
I apologize. I do not go searching for random articles. I'm sorry, since I made you a run for your money.
So, in your opinion, were you aware of what the state of the levees were before the hurricane hit?
Yes.
And would you say that they were acceptable?
Yeah.
Why didn't you appeal to the government and local officials for funding on improving and maintaining the levees of New Orleans?
I am a local official and I have needed to my higher powers, I guess, for advancements on the levees, but no response was ever given back.
All right. That's all.
I'd like to call to the stand Charles Churchill. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right. Can you explain the Homeland Security Act to me, please?
Yes, I can. Congress passed the Homeland Security Act in 2002. With extreme support from President Bush, the act reformulated multiple branches of Homeland Security so they can work together in all aspects of Homeland Security's responsibilities, including natural disasters, which FEMA previously had full charge in this area. It also authorizes Homeland Security must work with state, local, and public safety administrations to manage the response of a terrorist attack or a natural disaster.
All right. Why then was this an important issue when the post-Katrina Acts came out?
Well, the post-Katrina Acts declared FEMA as the main emergency response unit and added multiple positions to the organization that focus on in particular areas on emergency response. The positions include such things as a national integration center, a national infrastructure simulation analysis center, a disability coordinator, a national operations center, a chief medical officer, and small state and rural advocate. The post-Katrina Acts also declare that FEMA work with non-federal support in responses to natural disasters. However, they are given more power to ensure quick response, whereas before they could not act without authorization from local or state governments.
Let me just explain a little bit. The post-Katrina Acts were issued by Congress in about 2007 when, after Hurricane Katrina, everyone realized that something was seriously wrong, that there wasn't enough powers given to actually do something. So that's what, in the post-Katrina Act, as Mr. Chertoff just said, they issued a lot of positions that weren't there before that take care of situations. And one more question for you. Can you explain the role of the national versus state and local governments in the natural disaster?
Yeah. The state and local government hold the responsibilities of declaring a state of emergency and to ensure the organization of a response to a natural disaster. Once a mandatory evacuation is set in place, the state and local government are to provide transportation to those who cannot find it on their own by seeking help of the federal government or by other means. And mandatory evacuations state that the residents must leave under penalty of law, and if they choose to stay, there will be little help provided until organization can be made.
Thank you. That's all.
So going off of what your attorney has said, then it is the federal government's responsibility to provide transportation after the hurricane, after the people who were able to evacuate have evacuated?
Yes, but local and state government must authorize it beforehand.
FEMA, whenever they were asked for the hundreds of buses to arrive to the Superdome to evacuate the trapped and innocent victims in the Superdome, where were those buses?
They were only given about 20 hours response. The federal state of emergency was set on the Sunday before the Monday Hurricane Katrina hit, which barely provided any opportunity for FEMA to organize buses. I mean, as you can see, getting companies to go and organize buses can cause problems because it's not our buses, it's businesses.
So could you please tell me where you were on the day of August 28th, 2005? Mr. Sherdoff, were you notified of the advance warnings of the deadly potential of Hurricane Katrina much in advance to its landing, weren't you?
Yes, a few days before there was a meeting to be aware, but also it was under the power of the state and local government to organize and ask for federal help before we could even go in.
Max Mayfield, Director of National Hurricane Center, informed all of federal government, correct?
Yes.
So that you knew the likelihood of Katrina being a catastrophic event, but isn't it true that you failed to identify it as one when calling it in?
Yes, along with Governor Blanco and Mayor Nagin, and failing to make a state of emergency 48 hours ahead of time.
But as a catastrophic event, New Orleans would have received the response it needed, am I right?
Yes.
Okay. I understand that if Katrina was indeed classified as catastrophic, this would have permitted federal government to immediately be notified and collect the resources needed to properly respond without the need of state and local government. Am I correct? So, had you called in the emergency properly, many of the lives taken could have been saved. You would agree with me that FEMA sent massive amounts of aid to the tsunami victims in Haiti and Japan, yes?
Yeah.
But yet, the government failed to respond to our own country when faced with the largest natural disaster in American history.
Yes, because our acts and our laws here make it so that state and local government must authorize us to help before we can.
But if you would have, you've seen that local and state governments weren't going up to your standards, so therefore you could have called in as catastrophic and overrode all of their lacking resources.
Not under the current laws and acts. The Post-Katrina Act made it possible for FEMA to have more power to ensure without local or state government authorization, and that was not set until after.
So you believe you do not have the power as head director of Homeland Security to override the mayor and governor?
No, not without authorization.
Okay. Do you honestly believe that you did everything in your power then to protect the lives of American citizens?
Under current time that I was given and the opportunities, yes.
Do you think that Michael Brown was qualified to head FEMA in the case of a natural disaster?
I cannot speak for Michael Brown. He was the branch of FEMA, he's director. He had that.
But isn't it true that Homeland Security and President Bush appointed Brown in the position for head of FEMA?
Yes, as all director and most Homeland Security and most branches of Homeland Security are chosen by the president.
So, let me read something to you, jury. FEMA given full authority to mobilize on Saturday, August 27th. This is days before hurricane hit the land. FEMA was given full authority to mobilize, identify, and provide at its own discretion equipment and resources to alleviate the impact of Hurricane Katrina. Local and government requested 800 buses for the Superdome victims, but instead, FEMA sent 100. Before joining FEMA, what experience did Brown have that made him appealing to you and Mr. Bush?
He was a good leader.
Okay, well, his resume shows that he was hired and fired by International Arabian Horse Association. How would that look appealing to you and Mr. Bush?
It was not a federal business, so we thought he could handle it.
Had FEMA had better leadership, would the response have been better for the suffering and starving victims in the floods?
A lot of circumstances could have been changed
So therefore, had you responded to the signs given and appointed properly qualified officials to handle natural disasters, lives for those in New Orleans may have had a better fate.
It's a good chance that would have happened, but then again, the state and local government didn't do their part, in my opinion.
That's all I have.
All right, the defense would like to call President Bush to the stand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, so President Bush, can you please state what the 10th Amendment is so everyone can hear?
Yeah. Under the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, all powers not granted to the federal government are reserved for the states and the people.
So because of this amendment, you could not directly lend aid to the residents of New Orleans until the local government consented to you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you. And can you tell me who the first responders are considered during disasters such as Hurricane Katrina?
Yeah. Local and the state governments are responsible for being first responders in all types of disasters. The federal government cannot respond until state and local government have initiated the process. However, under the new post-Katrina Act, FEMA has more power to respond more quickly to disasters before the non-federal governments organize. During the Hurricane Katrina, they could not.
Now, can you please state what the president's responsibilities are during a disaster?
Before the Post-Katrina Act, the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of 2006, the president did not hold any formal responsibilities for natural disasters. It was left up to Homeland Security and FEMA to organize with the orders of local and state governments.
Thank you. So it's not until the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act of 2006 did the president have any forms of responsibility in terms of helping prepare for natural disasters. And I think with that bit of information, it's not just to charge someone with crimes which he can't commit. He holds no responsibility in that situation, therefore it's unjust to consider him responsible for any of those actions that happened during Hurricane Katrina. Now, can you tell me exactly when it was that Governor Blanco handed over power to the federal government?
She asked for a federal state of emergency roughly 20 hours before the storm hit the coast of New Orleans.
Okay, so Governor Blanco and Mayor Ray Nagin were both aware that for all residents of New Orleans to be evacuated, and this includes disabled and immobile residents such as people currently in hospitals and other situations, and it would take 48 hours to do so, yet Governor Blanco and Mayor Ray Nagin both waited 20 hours before the storm hit to consult the president for his help with the federal government. Is that true?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Do you feel that it was that 20 hours provided enough time for federal government to respond in such a dire situation?
No.
And do you feel like they could have done a better job at informing you sooner?
I think they could have. Governor Blanco seemed to be very persistent on wanting to do things her way and only her way during the time. If she had given power over to the federal government sooner, then our staff would have had enough time to prepare and supply provisions for the hurricane victims, but that was not the case.
And so then the lack of coordination and the lack of preparation that is so conveniently and inaccurately placed on the federal government 48-hour mandatory evacuation for disabled residents in New Orleans. She never properly provisioned the city for those who would be trapped, and she waited far too long to bring the National Guard for security, rescue, and evacuation purposes. And when she finally caught up with reality, she decided to drop all of her problems and all the responsibilities of the situation on the federal government, and all in less than a day. That is clearly not enough time to help prepare for this situation. Thank you.
Excuse me, a few steps back then.
Okay, President Bush, do you recall where you were Monday, August 29, 2005, the day Hurricane Katrina hit?
Yes, I was giving speeches. I think that was the day I was giving speeches on the drug committee. The new laws I was coming up with, talking to senior citizens, and I was also giving speeches on the terrorist. The
Speeches
on terrorism.
Or more like vacation?
It was classified as vacation. I was in a lodge.
Okay, so you remained in Crawford, Texas, on vacation from Monday, the day the hurricane hit, until the following Wednesday. Why is that? Why were you on vacation, living up the life when thousands of people were dying?
The vacation was already scheduled beforehand. I actually cut my vacation 2 days back, and in the meantime of my speeches, I was talking with Homeland Security and other local governments.
So you stayed on vacation while your American people were dying?
Yes, I had already had plans to do that.
I don't think these people planned to die. I'm sorry it was inconvenient. Why did you stay on vacation?
Because I had to finish the speeches, but I was also coordinating with other response teams.
Okay. So you hired Brown to be the head of FEMA. What were his qualities that made you appoint him?
He was a good leader.
He was a good leader, you say. Well, obviously he wasn't, because after that he didn't really help. So he had no previous work experience. And if the reporter could see that, I don't understand how the president couldn't have seen that. And you said that you didn't know until 20 hours before the dire situation that the hurricane would be in, correct?
Yes.
But Max Mayfield gave warnings prior to those 20 hours.
He also gave warning to state and local government, and they knew the devastation and the current conditions of the levees, and it was their responsibility to organize with FEMA or Homeland Security to organize transportation out, but they failed to do so 48 hours ahead.
Okay. Do you believe that you are innocent you are not guilty for the lives that were lost during Hurricane Katrina?
No.
No? You don't think you're guilty? Okay. Then do you retract this statement you made in that you take responsibility for everything that the federal government did wrong?
Under president, that's the way I have to be, yeah.
Okay, I think this is decent. That is all.
Judge Knopfsinger, are we going to go another witness?
I think given the time that we'll have to take a recess and reconvene on Wednesday.
Why don't we finish with this witness, so then all we'll have is the closing arguments.
Okay, approximately how long for the witness?
They got like 2 minutes.
Okay.
3 minutes maybe.
I disagree. I don't think that I have enough time to be able to fully
Cross.
engage.
All right. Given that the next trial that's going to take place is also being overseen by me, we can go over, I would say, about 5 minutes, unless the jury needs to immediately be somewhere else.
All right, good. All right, I'd like to call to the stand Mayor Ray Negan. Mr. Mayor, are you familiar with a program called Prepare for the Big One? Oh, well, you were in the DVD, but I'll get to that later. Total Community Action is an organization that was working in New Orleans to help promote hurricane awareness.
Objection. You always lecture us when you're supposed
I'm
to be
asking questions. I object to that objection.
All right. Sustained.
30-minute DVDs. And on the DVDs, Mr. Reagan, or Negan, Mr. Negan, I have a quote from you, if you could verify if this is true, saying, "Everybody needs to have their own plans." Did you say that? Because I'm pretty sure it's on video evidence, but go ahead. Yes, no?
Sure.
Okay. Well, the DVD had the message of, well, here's a quote, "You're responsible for your safety, and you should be responsible for the person next to you." The DVD essentially says that the government is not helping you, citizens of New Orleans. Do you agree with this message?
If I said it, then yes.
Okay. And along with Mayor Ray Negan, there's other local officials on the DVD that say that the government is not responsible for the welfare of the citizens. And the most ironic thing about this DVD is while it was being made in the summer before Hurricane Katrina hit, the DVD actually didn't surface till after Hurricane Katrina. So irony abounds on the local government who was trying to tell its citizens that they're responsible and that they should be responsible for any kind of transportation out of the city, even if there's a quote in here that even if they don't have a car, they're still responsible.
I'm sorry, is there a question?
Yes, I'll give you another question, Mr. Ray Negan. Negan, yes.
Negan.
If the citizens are responsible, how would you say that the federal government's responsible for transporting
Federal
people up?
government's responsible for its citizens, is it not?
But did you not say in the video that those citizens are responsible for themselves?
They may be responsible for themselves, but the government's supposed to assist them.
You said plainly everybody needs to have their own plan. Not the government's plan, their own plan.
So the government should still execute its own plan.
The government should have a plan, but you're directly saying in this DVD that the citizens shouldn't rely on the government.
I never said that. I said that citizens should rely on themselves, but government's plan should still be executed, regardless.
You support the DVD, and in the DVD it says, we do not have the transportation. Like, we can help you, but we do not have the transportation.
Under my power given to me, I do not have the transportation. Under the government's power, they have the transportation.
And when you say government, is that local, state, federal?
Federal.
Okay. I'd like to make that
Because
clear.
I'm kind of local.
Okay. Well, that's all I have on that. That's Russ.
So, what defense is saying then is that you do not have the means to execute based off of the federal plans. So, are the... I just want to yell at you. That's all I want to do right now.
Oh, okay. Wait till the closing argument.
Do you believe that the federal government's job is to protect the people?
Yes.
Do you believe that the federal government executed those plans to protect the people?
No.
Do you believe that you did everything in your power to protect the people?
Absolutely.
That's all I have.
Okay, this